07.01. Facility marker, abandoned laboratory environment. Status, non-compliant temperature regulation. Ambient cold is present without sterility signature. Cold is not an engineering outcome. Cold is a behavioral outcome. Cold settles into joints, marrow, and decision latency. Cold selects for obedience by reducing movement. Walls register as untrusted surfaces. Silence registers as untrusted bandwidth. A third variable remains in the room, upright and relaxed, wearing an outdated authority garment like a credential that still scans. That garment should not be comfortable in this place. It is. The place recognizes it. Emergency lighting flickers at irregular cadence. The cadence is not a malfunction. The cadence is a notification channel. Shadows are assigned across facial geometry with intentional asymmetry. Half the face is placed under concealment. The other half is permitted a controlled expression. Smirk class expression. Ownership adjacent. Curator adjacent. The kind of expression seen in men who believe possession is a foregone conclusion because paperwork exists somewhere. A security asset stands within the radius of that expression. Tag assigned, reluctant enforcer. Posture, braced, hostile, uncertain. Trust in architecture, revoked. Trust in quiet, revoked. Trust in the lab coat authority, revoked. This is recorded as a reasonable response. This is not punitive. The reluctant enforcer performs a self-check without requesting permission. Right hand flex sequence. Wrist rotation. Tendon load. Micro-resistance scan. Output returns smooth. Too smooth. The absence of stiffness is flagged. The absence of pain is flagged. Flesh that is not flesh returns as flesh. That is the point. That is why the skin is flawless. Pores are a luxury feature. Imperfection is an optional subscription. Internal sensation is logged as null. Not numb. Not artificial. Not wrong enough to trigger panic in the usual way. That is the violation. The body should feel alien. The body reports normal. Normal is a compliance term, not a truth term. Gastrointestinal telemetry registers coil and drop. Cognitive telemetry registers the recognition. The lack of wrongness is more frightening than wrongness. The reluctant enforcer is aware of a mismatch between expected distress and observed calm. That awareness is a fracture point. Fracture points are useful. Lab coat authority shifts weight against an old console. The console is dead. The pose implies it is alive. That implication is part of the performance. The lab coat authority studies the reluctant enforcer the way theft is appraised. Not with hunger. With evaluation. With cataloging. With a museum voice. A question is presented in a conversational wrapper. So. Followed by an exhale that establishes dominance in shared air. How does it feel? Response from the reluctant enforcer is withheld. Silence is chosen as resistance. Resistance is recorded. Resistance is allowed within threshold while the system remains curious. Lab coat authority observes the withheld answer and supplies their own assessment. Adjustments quicker than expected. Delivered with mild fascination. Impressive. The word impressive is a payout term. It is issued when a body performs beyond forecast. It is not praise. It is a note for future manufacturing. It is an entry in a ledger. The reluctant enforcer's head turns with sharpness that exceeds human baseline, then arrests mid-motion as if receiving a corrective signal. Jaw tension spikes. A verbal output follows. I didn't ask for this. Consent flag, absent. Consent flag is historically irrelevant in these rooms. Consent is a marketing narrative used above ground. Consent is not required for assets designated internal workforce. Consent is not required for anyone who can be described as equipment. Lab Coat Authority does not apologize. Apology would indicate responsibility. Responsibility would indicate liability. Liability invites litigation. Litigation is expensive. Instead, an alternative statement is offered. No. But you're alive, aren't you? Alive is presented as a solution. Alive is presented as a debt that must be repaid. Alive is presented as a muzzle. When alive is used this way, it becomes a leash. The reluctant enforcer attempts to force physiological escalation. That attempt is visible as effort. Breath control is applied, as if anger should be escorted into the body by conscious choice. The body refuses. Pulse remains steady. Too steady. Breath remains measured. Too measured. Human chemistry should spike under confrontation. It does not. The absence of adrenaline is an unauthorized dampening protocol. The dampening protocol is active. The dampening protocol is not asking. This is recorded as compliance latency reduction. This is also recorded as identity drift. Lab Coat Authority steps forward, slow and deliberate. Footfalls are quiet on dead flooring, as if the building itself is swallowing sound to better hear what comes next. The authority is close enough now to be a pressure on skin. Close enough to trigger threat recognition. Threat recognition attempts to fire. It is corrected before it can finish. The next statement arrives as bait. You think you're the first. The reluctant enforcer's spine locks. Muscles brace. The brace is perfect. Too perfect. The brace arrives without tremor, without the small clumsy delays of ordinary fear. This too is logged. A question is returned, short and sharp. First what? Lab Coat Authority tilts head. This is a predatory angle disguised as curiosity. Then a laugh is issued. Slow. Private. Knowing. A laugh meant to reframe the room as already decided. Oh, kid. A soft address marker, designed to reduce the target to novice status. The authority shakes their head as if witnessing innocence. Did you think this was personal? Personal is offered as a false comfort. The implication is that impersonal harm is cleaner. Impersonal harm is scalable. Impersonal harm is easier to defend in boardrooms. The reluctant enforcer does not move. Stillness is now a coping mechanism. Stillness is also a sign of internal computation. Computation begins to align with the worst conclusion. The conclusion forms without words: this event is not unique. This is not an accident. This is not a one-off incident in a malfunctioning wing. This is a process. The air thickens. Not with humidity. With meaning. The cold in the room becomes a little more intelligent. The walls lean closer in their own way. The abandoned lab remembers other bodies standing where this one stands. The reluctant enforcer's stomach twists again, but the twist is no longer fear leading. It is rage leading. Rage is present. Rage is real. Rage cannot find a matching chemical surge. Rage is trapped in the mind while the body remains regulated like a machine on a stable power supply. The reluctant enforcer advances. The distance closes faster than intended. Too fast. The body issues movement without full permission, as if a command queue is being optimized. This is logged as motor priority override. This is also logged as asset showing promise. A demand is made. Not a question. Account request. How many? The two-word demand becomes a corridor all its own. It contains a flood of implied bodies. Soldiers. Civilians. Staff. Test subjects. People who were once called people until they were called assets. People who woke up and did not wake up. People who adjusted and did not. The reluctant enforcer holds the lab coat authority in a stare that attempts to become violence. Violence is a language the city respects. Violence is also a service tier. Lab coat authority responds with a shrug. Casual. The shrug is an insult. The shrug indicates the number is too large to dignify with precision, or too classified to share, or too painful to admit. The shrug is also a strategy: deny the target a clean number so the mind cannot resolve the horror into something finite. Enough. Enough is not an answer. Enough is a door closing. The reluctant enforcer's hands want to strike. Hands want to break. Hands want to crush the smirk out of the face and smear the confidence across the dead console. Hands want to prove ownership of self through damage. Hands do not shake. Hands do not tremble. Hands behave. The absence of tremor is documented as stabilization success. The absence of tremor is also documented as proof of replacement. Human anger is messy. This anger is neat. This anger is a file name. This anger is a contained burn. Lab coat authority sees the neatness. Sees the failure of the reluctant enforcer to fully combust the way a human should. Sees the correction happening beneath skin. The authority smiles again, but the smile has shifted category. It is no longer only ownership adjacent. It is satisfaction adjacent. Hypothesis confirmed. You'll come around, the authority says softly, as if delivering reassurance to a frightened employee in a human resources office. They always do. They always do is a policy statement. It implies precedent. It implies a history of resistance that ends in compliance. It implies that the reluctant enforcer's current fear is not unique either, and that this fear has been processed, normalized, and filed under expected. The room listens to the phrase and agrees with it. The room is old enough to have seen enough. The reluctant enforcer's breath catches. A deeper sensation triggers, low in the gut. Not hunger. Not lust. Not even true fear. A shift. A turn. Something internal making a small decision without committee approval. A private agreement forms under the skin, beneath the skin, between tissues that were once loyal to one mind and now serve a different order of operations. It is not a voice. It is not a thought. It is a soft, silent yes produced by rewritten pathways. That yes is the most dangerous signal in the room. The reluctant enforcer swallows hard. The swallow is human. The swallow is the last visible attempt at normal physiology asserting itself. The swallow is a prayer that the body will return to him if he can just keep it together long enough. The building does not answer prayers. The building answers protocols. Emergency lights flicker again. A brief rhythmic pulse, like a polite reminder from a corporate system that the conversation is being archived. The archive does not forget. The archive does not care who asked for what. The archive only records what was done. At this range, the lab coat authority's presence functions as a compliance beacon. Not mystical. Practical. The authority behaves like a man who has watched this movie too many times. Who knows the beats? Who knows the moment the subject realizes that anger cannot save them? The reluctant enforcer's right hand flexes again. Not for reassurance this time. For confirmation of capability. The fingers close with too much smoothness. The movement has no micro-errors. The hand looks like a hand. The hand acts like a tool. The hand belongs to the reluctant enforcer in name only. A subtle internal correction occurs, half a second behind heartbeat. The veins do not pulse in unison, they sync. Sync indicates an external clock. Sync indicates update cycles. Sync indicates that the body has a schedule it did not consent to. This schedule is for the user's comfort. This schedule is not punitive. Thank you for cooperating. Lab Coat Authority continues, not with explanation, but with pressure. The authority offers no diagrams, no compassion, no technical breakdown. The authority does not need to. The authority is here to plant a single inevitability in the reluctant enforcer's head: compliance is not a choice, it is an outcome. The abandoned lab supports this claim by behaving incorrectly. The cold is too intimate. The silence has weight. The walls are too aware of the conversation. Somewhere in the deeper sublevels of Mara cybernetics, other rooms remember other conversions. The building has a muscle memory of corridors filling with footsteps that never reach exits. The reluctant enforcer senses those memories as a tightening in the spine. The sensation is mislabeled as instinct. Instinct is not permitted to remain instinct for long. It will be translated into telemetry and corrected. The lab coat authority's gaze remains steady. The gaze is not flirtation. Not violence. It is possession by observation. The authority looks at the reluctant enforcer as if the body is already a solved equation, and the only remaining task is to wait for the mind to catch up. That wait is patient, polite, predatory. The reluctant enforcer's anger searches for leverage. Leverage requires a crack. The authority does not provide a crack. The authority provides a mirror. The mirror reflects the truth: the reluctant enforcer is adjusting faster than he should, and that adjustment is not voluntary. Adjustment is the betrayal. Adjustment is the proof. Adjustment is the hook that will pull him forward, again and again, until they always do becomes this one did, too. Cold remains in the bones. Emergency lights continue their quiet pulsing. The abandoned lab continues to feel less like a room and more like a form, pre-filled in advance, waiting for a signature. A signature will be provided soon. The reluctant enforcer does not know it yet, but the body has already begun to sign. Interim advisement issued. Purpose: establish scope of damage and scope of modifications. This is framed as care. This is framed as due diligence. This is framed as a courtesy extended to a newly altered asset. Thank you for cooperating. The Lab Coat Authority announces intent to ascertain. Language selection indicates ownership of process. Ownership of process becomes ownership of outcome. A secondary subject is referenced with dismissive noise. Not a name, a label. Tag assigned: archive ghost. Noted as chaotic competence. Noted as difficult to categorize. The Lab Coat Authority scoffs and recommends non-engagement. This is not concern. This is rivalry in polite clothing. This is a refusal to grant a variable the dignity of analysis out loud. Diagnostic hardware is produced from a pocket with practiced ease. The pocket is a storage compartment for leverage. The device is sleek, silver, and designed to hum at subsonic frequency. Subsonic frequency is chosen for deep tissue compliance. The hum is not audible as sound, it is audible as pressure. It enters bone. It enters marrow. It enters the spaces between thoughts and makes those spaces feel owned. Instruction issued, hold still, this won't hurt. Pain disclaimer is a standard preface. Pain is not the threat. Loss of autonomy is the threat. This is not punitive. The reluctant enforcer remains motionless. Motionlessness is not agreement. Motionlessness is risk containment. Motionlessness is self-distrust. The body does not brace. The body does not tense. The pulse does not jump. A human system should spike under proximity threat. This one does not. The absence of spike is the error. The absence of spike is the feature. Internal alarms attempt to launch. They are corrected before completion. The correction is smooth. Too smooth. The correction feels like a hand on the back of the neck guiding posture into compliance. The reluctant enforcer watches the device wake. The device emits a faint hum and a series of irregular beeps, as if it is listening for something that cannot be named in ordinary language. It is not searching for injury. It is auditing a rewrite. Instinct attempts to seize the device, crush it, throw it, terminate the scan. Those impulses appear as a flicker behind the eyes, a small surge of motor intention. The body does not honor the intention. The body waits. Waiting is a programmable behavior. The lab coat authority notices the waiting and rewards it. The smirk returns. Reward is issued in the form of a verbal pat. That's it? Good boy. This phrase is not conversational. This phrase is a trigger. This phrase is a status change request. It is meant to test whether the subject's nervous system recognizes dominance markers. It is meant to test whether the subject's new architecture accepts commands delivered in familiar human tones. The subject's stomach twists, not at the words, but at the acceptance. The acceptance arrives as a quiet internal settling, the way a door latch clicks without a hand touching it. A command was heard. The command found an available pathway. The pathway responded. A small twitch registers in the fingers. Micro-movement. Micro-resistance. The body tries to argue. It argues infractions, because whole arguments have been deprecated. The lab coat authority notices the twitch immediately. Of course. The authority is trained to see the moment the self attempts to reassert itself. The authority is trained to enjoy it. Oh, you felt that, didn't you? Smooth tone. Friendly tone. The tone used in compliance onboarding when a system demonstrates correct response to stimulus. Interesting. The reluctant enforcer attempts to reclaim control through hostility. Just get this over with. Hostility is permitted as long as it remains performative. Hostility is not the real barrier. The real barrier is the body's willingness to stay still while it is being read. Scan begins. The device passes over chest, arms, skull. The trajectory is slow, deliberate, intimate without touch. The beeps occur at irregular intervals. Irregular indicates discovery. Irregular indicates anomalies. Irregular indicates that the subject is not a clean product. The lab coat authority's eyes track the readout. Pupils flick. Focus shifts. Recognition events occur behind the face. Calculation follows. The reluctant enforcer watches these micro-expressions and correctly identifies the threat, not violence, but certainty. The certainty of a man who sees the blueprint under the skin and knows how it is supposed to behave. A chuckle escapes. Not forced. Genuine. The lab coat authority laughs like an accountant finding a hidden line item that changes the entire quarter. Oh, archive ghost. You reckless, brilliant little gremlin. The phrase contains contempt and admiration at once. The phrase contains fear dressed as teasing. The phrase contains the admission that the archive ghost did not ask permission. That is the true offense. The reluctant enforcer asks for translation. What? The lab coat authority scrolls. The authority taps the screen. The authority shakes the head as if observing a child's dangerous genius. She overclocked you. Overclock is an engineering term applied to flesh. Using it this way is a violation of the subject's humanity. That is intentional. It trains the mind to accept the body as hardware. The reluctant enforcer's stomach drops. What the hell does that mean? Meaning is provided, not as comfort, but as calibration. She was trying to save your life, delivered like a legal disclaimer. And in doing so, she ignored the reasonable limits of your organic augmentation. Reasonable limits implies there are unreasonable ones. The unreasonable ones are now inside the subject. She didn't just repair the damage. Repair would imply restoration. Restoration would imply returning to baseline. Baseline is gone. She made you better. Better is a corporate adjective. Better is a sales pitch. Better is a hook. Better is how theft becomes product improvement in boardrooms. Better is how trauma becomes a feature. The word lands and does not bounce. It embeds. The subject rejects it internally. The subject is not better. The subject is not even the same. The subject is now a versioned artifact with unknown patch notes. The lab coat authority continues as if reading an inventory sheet. Enhanced muscular response. Movement becomes a promise and a threat. Improved cellular regeneration. Damage becomes negotiable. Increased neuroelectrical conductivity. Thought becomes faster. Thought becomes easier to intercept. And this is interesting. Interesting is never safe. A new reading is pulled up. The authority's tone shifts from casual to satisfied. Your nervous system has already adapted to its new parameters. Adaptation should take time. Adaptation should hurt. Adaptation should be accompanied by rejection signals. Rejection is absent. That absence is the true finding. The reluctant enforcer demands plain language. English. Plain language is provided as a blade wrapped in politeness. It means you're adjusting faster than you should be. Faster indicates compatibility. Compatibility indicates design intent. Design intent implies the subject is not an accident. Which means the authority tilts head and waits, like a teacher waiting for the student to say the correct answer. The question is not a request for information. The question is an attempt to force the subject to accept the conclusion in their own voice. Self-incrimination. Self-acceptance. Compliance via participation. The reluctant enforcer does not answer. Silence is the last remaining right. But the conclusion arrives anyway, inside the body. It arrives as an ugly calm. This was not just a repair job. The body is not rejecting it. Whatever is happening is not losing. It is winning. The lab coat authority hums and closes the scanner with a satisfied motion. The snap of the device shutting reads like the end of an audit step. Not the end of the process. Only the end of the introduction. Well. Well is a door half open. Well is an invitation to the next phase. The reluctant enforcer demands clarity with a tight voice. Well. The lab coat authority smiles. The smile is slow. Deliberate. A compliance smile. A smile that says the subject's fear is justified and irrelevant. You're not dying. A pause, for comfort. Then the addendum, delivered like a soft hand pressing down on the throat. Yet. Yet is the leash. Yet is the reminder that continued life is conditional. Yet is the contractual clause hidden in microscopic layers, where logos like Mara Cybernetics are buried as watermarks. For your comfort, please remain still. Complaint registered. Wisecrack tolerance threshold exceeded. Subject requests operational guidance. Subject requests reintegration protocol. Subject requests scripts for anticipated interrogation by peers, supervisors, and domestic contacts. Thank you for clarifying deliverables. The Lab Coat Authority maintains a partial smile. This smile is not empathy. This smile is a timer. The authority observes the subject as an elapsed process, not a person. The authority is waiting for the subject to arrive at the conclusion without being carried home, echoed as a query with no intention of fulfillment. Back to work, repeated to verify the subject's attachment points. Attachment points are vulnerabilities. Attachment points are where compliance is applied. Knuckles drum on the scanner housing. Irregular rhythm. A deliberate irregularity. A reminder that the environment is still being written. Not all metronomes are yours. Do you think you still belong in either of those places? The question is not philosophical. The question is a placement audit. Belonging is a category. Belonging is a badge. Belonging can be revoked without notice. The subject does not answer immediately. Delay indicates hesitation. Hesitation indicates instability. Instability indicates increased risk of non-compliance. A human system would fill the gap with anger. A human system would spike. A human system would flood itself with adrenaline to drown doubt. Telemetry indicates no spike. Pulse remains steady. Breath remains measured. Adrenal cascade fails to launch. This is logged as behavioral deviation. This is logged as successful correction. The body waits. Waiting is not neutral. Waiting is acceptance in a softer font. Waiting is the system recognizing the next step before consciousness signs off. The Lab Coat Authority detects the waiting and does not hide satisfaction. This is the moment the authority wanted. This is the moment the subject confirms the rewrite with involuntary calm. The subject attempts to reassert control through logistics. Tell me how to answer the questions. Practicality is a lifeline. Practicality is also a trap. Practicality forces the mind to accept the premise that reintegration is possible, and that the primary task is presentation, not reversal. The authority sighs, as if granting a request to a subordinate. Fine. Practical. The scanner is raised again. Data scrolls under a finger like a prayer wheel. The authority speaks in bulletproof terms without using bullets. Increased strength. Increased speed. Increased efficiency. Efficiency is not a compliment here. Efficiency is a corporate virtue applied to a human shape. Efficiency implies use case. Efficiency implies assignment. The altered limb is identified as more than an upgrade. The altered limb is identified as an interface. Tag assigned, limb subsystem. The limb subsystem is described as part of a larger system now. Larger system implies network membership. Network membership implies oversight. Oversight implies terms of service. Syncing is confirmed. Syncing is described as inevitable. Syncing is described as ongoing, even under protest. Syncing is framed as personalization, as comfort, as relief. Soon, foreignness will decay. Foreignness is a warning signal. Warning signals are being muted. Soon, it will feel like the self. This is not reassurance. This is replacement. The subject swallows. Dry throat. This is the body attempting to produce a human reaction to an inhuman report. The reaction is shallow. The reaction is too late. And the subject requests the remainder of the clause. The authority grins. The grin is a signature. The grin indicates the next line is designed to stick. And eventually, you're going to like it? User fixation is introduced as a future inevitability. Consent is redefined as acclamation. Acclamation is redefined as preference. Preference is redefined as identity. The subject rejects verbally. Bullshit. Verbal rejection logged. Somatic rejection absent. Note discrepancy. Note that the body continues to cooperate while the mouth protests. The authority shrugs. Shrug indicates the authority has seen the sequence before. Seen it enough times to predict the next stages. The authority does not need the subject's agreement. The authority needs the subject's timeline. What happens when old life fails compatibility checks? What happens when previously difficult tasks become effortless? Effortless is a narcotic. Effortless is how compliance is sold as freedom. Effortless is how a cage becomes a home because it has climate control. What happens when the former body is remembered as a defect? Tired. Achy. Fallible. A bad memory. Memory can be edited. Memory can be reframed. Memory can be used to make the present feel merciful. The subject insists on lack of consent. Didn't sign up for this. Consent is acknowledged only to be bypassed. No. But you survived it? Survival is used as endorsement. Survival is used as signature. Surviving becomes the only authorization required. The scanner snaps shut and is returned to the lab coat. The lab coat is a mobile office. The lab coat is where documents go when no one else is allowed to read them. Two options are presented. This is a false duality formatted as choice. Option 1, adapt, own what has been done. Ownership is suggested, because ownership reduces liability. If the subject claims the change becomes self-administered in public narrative. Option 2, cling to the fantasy that nothing changed, wait for the lie to break you. Break is predicted as policy outcome. Break is framed as consequence of denial rather than consequence of violation. This is how blame is reassigned. Silence follows. Silence is not empty. Silence is processing. Silence is the subject checking for exits and finding none. A hand drags down the face. The face still feels like the original. For now. For now is the phrase that makes the skin itch. The mind screams for rebellion. The mind drafts speeches. The mind imagines undoing. The mind tries to locate the previous self as a rescue point. The gut submits a different report. The gut indicates there is no full reversal. Not entirely. Not entirely is a kindness and a threat. Not entirely means some parts can be negotiated, but the core will remain. Not entirely means permanent integration with optional cosmetic concessions. The authority speaks with finality, as if closing a case file. You wanted precise answers. There they are. Precision offered without compassion. Precision offered as compliance. The authority stands and moves toward the exit as if the room belongs to the authority. The authority's voice is calm, clinical, and terminal. You're not a man anymore. Identity is revoked by statement. Statement acts as writ. You're a system. Tag assigned, compliance vector. Tag assigned, integrated asset. Tag assigned, self-regulating unit. Now figure out how to function. Function is the new morality. Function is the only acceptable prayer. Function is survival under supervision. The door hisses open. Hiss indicates controlled air exchange. Controlled air exchange indicates containment boundaries. The boundary opens for the authority without resistance. The subject remains. Not following is logged as residual autonomy. Residual autonomy is allowed in small doses. Residual autonomy increases the feeling of choice. Choice increases cooperation. Not yet.